Hi, Year 11s. Okay, so this is the first of our actual content packs that we're going to go through. So they're all going to differ in length, and that's just because the content within them were all of their differing lengths. So if you cast your mind back to 1.1, this was enterprise and entrepreneurship. So this is what we're going to do. So it's going to highlight the key terminology. It's going to go at a very high level of the key ideas that came through each of these topics. What you need to do, if some of this is just complete gibberish to you, like you don't remember any of what I'm saying, or it's not really generating a lot of ideas or memories from back because people had a lot of stuff going on over the last 2 years, I would suggest you go back into Microsoft Teams, have a look through the slide packs of each of the individual topics. A lot of these slides that you'll see have come from there. Now, at different points throughout this video, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and actually do some practice answers. And at the very end of the video, I've got sample answers for those questions. So let's jump straight into it now. All right. So this video is going to cover, so we had point one was the dynamic nature of business. Point two was risk and reward. Point three was the role of business enterprise and the role of entrepreneurship. So we're just going to work through there. So starting with 1.1.1, the dynamic nature of business. So the word dynamic, so business is exciting because of its dynamic nature. The dynamic nature of business means it is ever changing because external factors are always changing. For instance, technology and people's needs. So when we think of the word dynamic, think of other words like flexibility and change. So that's generally what it means in a business context. The changes in technology were all ideas that came around, for example, mobile phone apps. So as we've gone through 3G, 4G, and now 5G, that's an example that's allowed for apps to be a lot more in-depth, a lot more graphics, and a lot more power in what they are doing. Other things like Amazon and eBay all came around with changes in technology. So of course you don't remember life before these, but I remember when they all came about, and I'm not that much older than you. So creating new services, mobile phone apps, mobile phone covers. The mobile phones have changed. So they used to just be a means of calling people. Now people do their banking, they do their social media, they do their advertising. People's lives are completely on phones. People can do their jobs on phones now. Things like virtual reality. So we're seeing a lot more of those virtual reality headsets coming through. These are all the changes in technology, and people are finding new ways of using this technology. So other things we see is 3D printing. And another big thing that you see is RFID. Now, this is being embedded in almost everything that we do. So those little cards and the lanyards that you see hanging around teachers' necks at school have a little chip in it, and that's what lets people in and out of through doors. Most office buildings have all of these technologies and things like that now. And RFID is also now used for a method of stock control. So instead of when a whole thing is being delivered to a store, instead of back what they used to have to do was count every single item to ensure that they'd received every item of goods. Now they can just scan an entire box, and the box will tell them how many chips, so how many of those items are inside that box, and they're able to do stock control in a matter of seconds rather than minutes. So these are some of the changes in technology that's happening. So changes in customer needs. So this is a big thing because customers are always changing. So you being in year 11 and your demographic of, teenagers, almost adults, are one of the biggest markets in the world now because there's so many of you as each generation gets bigger and bigger. So you guys influence a lot of what is happening in the market and what is being developed currently. So that's part of the changes in what you need. So a lot of your needs tend to be mobile phone based. A lot of the ways that a lot of you work and communicate are through social media. So these are part of the ideas of changing tastes and trends. So some examples that I've got here is like healthy drinks. People have become a lot more health aware. Wearable technology, smartwatches. People have like rings that they can use as like contactless payments. Ready-made meals. People want instantaneous things. They have like meals, either fresh meals delivered a few times a week, or they've got things in their freezer and so forth. A lot of the new generations are really caring about organic food. A lot more people are vegetarian and vegan now. So these are the types of options. Changes in customer needs can also be, for example, myself, who's gluten intolerant. These are the changes. So 30 years ago, no one really knew what gluten was. It wasn't really a thing. some people would get sick from foods that they ate and they'd just have to avoid certain foods altogether. Now that we recognize what some conditions are, with food intolerances, they now produce a whole line of foods for people who can't have certain ingredients and so forth. So these are some ideas of what is happening with changes in customer needs. But then you've also got things, environmental factors. So customers don't want plastic straws anymore. Now a lot more places like McDonald's have all switched to paper straws. Now, the other argument is paper straws don't work as good as plastic straws, but they're a lot better for the environment and things like that. Other things, we've got an aging population. So you've got a lot more people in that elderly category and their needs are changing. So we need a lot more accessible, friendly locations and things like that. So these are the ideas of what's changing in customer needs as well. The other thing that's happening in changes in customer needs is products becoming obsolete. So I think I talked about in some of our classes, we looked at video stores. So video stores were super popular back in the 80s and 90s, that you could go in somewhere, rent a video, and you'd pay per video that you hired, and then you'd return it the next day or a week later, depending on how long you'd rented the video for. Now that we have Netflix and other streaming services, people don't need video stores. So we'll have all talked about the Blockbuster video scenario. They've now all extinct. So they were all franchises and now no longer exist. A lot of people lost a lot of money in it as well. And then obviously Blockbuster itself went out of business. So these are the ideas. Also, the iPod. Everyone used to have like a digital MP3 player, but now it's all being replaced because everyone has their MP3 players on their phones. So again, other products, even modern technologies, are becoming obsolete quickly as well. So changes in customer needs and services becoming obsolete. So things are obsolete if no one wants it anymore. So the example here is chimney sweeps is a role as a service that no one wants anymore. And that's also because a lot of people don't have chimneys, or the chimneys now are of a completely different nature of what they used to be. Now in supermarkets, they've all got their butcher sections there. So the butcher is essentially done as part of the supermarket. So a lot of people don't tend to go, purely because it's more convenient to go to one place to do all of your shopping. They don't like to go to specialty stores anymore. Maybe it's because we've become a little bit lazier, but that's the part of the changing need. We all want things instantaneous. We're all time poor, at least as adults. And these are things that you'll be considering in the next few years yourselves. You've got black cab drivers. So everyone used to get taxis before, but now, thanks to mobile technology and the apps and everything, with the development of Uber, anyone can qualify to work. Essentially, you work for yourself using the platform, and that's put most cab drivers out of business. Obviously, they're still finding ways to keep them in business, but it doesn't have the draw as a job opportunity as it used to have. We've talked about the iPod already, and better ways of doing things is also a form of that. So people can now do all their emails and write letters and do everything sitting on the couch, typing up on an iPad. They used to have these big clunky typewriters that used to make so much noise, and also it would only produce one piece of paper and one letter at a time. So if you wanted to create duplicates, you'd have to literally type it out 4 or 5 times. Now you can print out your document and print it as many times as you like from the printer. So these are some examples of how they've changed as well. So the results of creativity. So there's 2 terms that come out of this part of the topic. One is invention. So that is the creation of new devices or processes. So an example here is the Dyson invented dual cyclone technology. This is the creation of something brand new. Now, the other one I want to talk about here is innovation. So innovation is refining an invention in order to bring it to the market. So essentially, the idea between invention and innovation is something that is created that is brand new. It's a brand new idea. And innovation is taking something that already exists and making it better. So the Apple iPhone, when that was first came out, the iPhone 3 or whatever they called it, that was an invention in itself. It was changing the way all smartphones worked, but then they've kept bringing out the iPhone 4, 4S, 5, 5S, and so forth. They're all innovating and existing an idea. So in theory, most other smartphones, in many cases, have been based off the iPhone. So they're essentially innovations of the original idea. The only one there that is the invention is the original iPhone. Now, saying that though, although iPhones do it, new apps coming out all the time that are not based on any new ideas. So I don't know which one the first one was, but the first dating app, like live dating app, was an invention itself. It was all based on internet dating, which existed before, but then it was invented in a new way to use it altogether. There's sort of little examples there. Invention being the creation, innovation taking an idea and making it better. Okay, so here is our first question. So explain one benefit to a business understanding changes in what customers want. So if you're out for a walk and listen to this as a podcast, you can come back to these questions later. Try not to listen to the answers at the end so it doesn't give it away. But if you're watching this at home, why don't you, if you're taking notes, pause the video here, give yourself 3 minutes time, because remember you've got 1 mark per minute on the exam. Give yourself 3 minutes and do this LT question. And if you can't remember how to do these questions, go back to the earlier video, which just talks about the taxonomy and the ways that you can answer these questions, but hopefully you should all be quite familiar with this model of answering. Okay, let's keep going. 1.1.2, risk and reward. So why do businesses fail? So some of the reasons business fail is you got rising costs, not enough government support, business rates. So these are like the taxes that you pay to have your business. You got the burden of regulation. Too much red tape is something. So red tape, a lot of people aren't familiar with the term, but the red tape that they use when there's something that's so hard to do and there's so many government hurdles for you to actually jump through before you can actually operate your business, it kind of makes it too hard to even start the business. It becomes a barrier to entry, not even considering your competition. It just becomes too hard to start that business. Competition can be a way that businesses can fail. Taxes, lack of not get enough finance to start your business, that can actually be a massive hindrance. And cash flow issues. So there can be a whole plethora of reasons of why businesses fail. Half of UK business startups the first 5 years. I actually think that statistic is actually even worse now. But that's just because there's lots of new business happening all the time, and some businesses just decide it's not functional to keep running. So this is a lot of text. If you want to pause this slide here and go through it in more detail, you can, because these are taken from the original slides. However, I want to just highlight this in high level. So when we think of cause of business failure, things sometimes have been badly organized. So generally, when you're a small startup, there are a lot of things that you're not an expert in. Obviously, you learn as you go, and you've got less to management. It's a smaller business. But if you're not well organized, so poor stock control, inefficient labor, so you've hired staff who are lazy, or you've hired family members to work in your shop or something. Although you may want to support your family, that might not always be the best thing for business. Bad customer service, people don't realize how important that good customer service is, and cash flow liquidity problems. So we'll talk in more detail about the cash flow problems, but obviously if you're not getting enough money in, you can't pay your bills and so forth, that's a problem. If maybe you're not paying your bills on time, you're badly organized in that respect, that also can become a cash flow problem. Overtrading is the thing that a lot of people do, especially if they've got a small business, and let's say you're starting up yourself as a private accountant. So overtrading is this idea that you'll take on so many clients that you actually don't have enough time to get all their work done, and you're trying to balance everything. And in many cases, if you take on too much work, you often don't do a good job. And if you're not doing a good job, that can either lead to A, bad customer service, or B, a poor reputation that you don't do great quality work, and you can lose business that way as well. Non-viable idea in the first place. So a lot of ideas are not researched appropriately, and it's only a matter of time before the business fails. Most of you would have seen a video that we watched in class about someone who had this great idea on the Dragon's Den. Well, it was a great idea to them, but it wasn't really a viable idea, as the Dragons kept pointing out. A lot of people are really passionate about their ideas to do something new that they believe is going to generate money. But if you don't do enough market research, which we'll talk about in the next topic, you might invest all of your money into your idea and there's a really small market for it and it kind of tanks. Other examples that I can think of is things like fads, like fidget spinners. They were huge. Some people made a lot of money in a really short space of time. Other people were trying to produce them as well and so forth. And the craze ended almost as soon as it came on. So there were a lot of people who had bought a lot of stock and had all this stock and couldn't sell because everyone stopped wanting them really quickly. So these are kind of different ideas that just badly honest, some ideas aren't viable, and sometimes being too enthusiastic about your job, like the overtraining, trying to take on so many clients and trying to please everyone, you actually do that. There's some ideas that you'd be able to unpack in BLT. So how can risks be reduced? So carrying out detailed market research. Again, we're going to talk about that in the next topic. Producing a business, we'll talk about in 1.4. Ensure that the business is competitive. And what we mean by that you're well priced, that there's a market for your products, that you're able to compete with other competitors in the same market and so forth. And also make sure that you've got sufficient startup funds and a plan what to do. Most businesses don't turn a lot of profits sometimes in the first 5 years, and that becomes part of their plan. So you have to work out how are you going to finance your operation in that time. So these are the ways that you can be reduced. Some ideas that we'll talk about, I'm not sure if we talk about in the slides, but we definitely talked about in the class content. Some ideas was around starting a business while you're actually in full-time work somewhere else. So you've got a steady income while your business is trying to get off the ground. So you don't have to worry about your business going under, nor do you have to worry about making money if you've got another source of money coming in elsewhere. What makes some businesses riskier than others? Things like seasonal demand. So one idea is like Christmas decorations. People only really want them around one time of the year for a couple of months. Ice cream, people tend to only want that in summer. Actually, that's a lie. I want ice cream all year round, but it's only popular in the warmer months. If it's a niche product, so there's a really small market for it, that is a risk and becomes quite a high risk of entry into that market because there may already be providers for that niche market. Obviously, what you want to try and do is, if you're going into a niche market, is trying to be the only or the most competitive supplier of that product or service. A highly competitive market with lots of competitors. So clothing is a really hard market to crack into. Plenty of other ones, but also an owner who knows little about the product or the market. So sometimes when you buy a franchise, it's a great idea, and on paper it seems fantastic. You've got all this support from your franchisor as the franchisee, but if you don't know a lot about the market that's going on or the location where you're having your franchise set up, that's also a huge risk. So a lot of people associate franchises as being a low-risk business opportunity, which we'll obviously look at again in 1.4. But ultimately, you still need to know your own market and product to know whether it really is a viable option, at least for you in that area, because every area is unique. Okay, so we talked about business risks. Now let's jump into reward. So the rewards are obviously business success, financial profit, and independence. So a lot of people also talk about excitement that comes from taking risks. So like the things that for gamblers, they get that thrill from when they finally have those wins. Obviously, gambling is not something that I'm promoting because I think gambling is horrible. So please beware. But most business startups are a risk in themselves, and it is a gamble whether it's going to succeed. But the more things you do to minimize those risks, the better those rewards can actually be. So that's kind of the good thing there. So rewards for business success, things like good planning, good cash flow forecasts, investments, and appropriate resources. Making sure that you understand your market helps the reward. Also building that experience and finding that gap in the market, or what we call the niche. Good decision making, strong business ideas, innovation of products, and effective management. You often need a lot of luck. Sometimes it's about timing. There are some inventions that come out a little bit ahead of their time. They tank, but then someone comes out almost with the same product 3, 4, 5 years later, and it ends up being a huge success. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there are definitely some business cases that you could Google if you wanted to. But these are part of those ideas. Financial efficiency, so making sure you've got good at budgeting and keeping to your budgets, good stock control, good customer service. They're all things that will reward business success when they're done well. So rewards for being profitable. So if revenues are greater than your costs, the business will be profitable. Simple as that. So often in businesses' first years, there's a lot more startup costs involved, or sales are quite slow. So often they're not profitable in the first few years, but that's okay if you plan for that. As the business becomes more established, it's more likely that profits will increase. So over time, the idea is that good customer service, you'll be able to build a steady customer flow once customers know that you're there. It is all linked to obviously understanding the market and brand awareness. Business owners are likely to work harder as the profits accrue to them. So you want your business to succeed, so you have to work hard. You're emotionally invested. If your business is failing, you're probably going to find that disheartening, and you're probably going to become a little bit more disengaged with your business or give up. So the idea is when that money is coming through, that inspires you to keep on working hard. So that's part of the reward of being profitable. Now, when we talk about independence as being a reward, the thing that really comes down to is most people who work for themselves like to be their own boss. Of course, that means they wear a lot of the risk and the burden themselves. So we'll also talk about limited and unlimited liability. So obviously, sole traders tend to have unlimited liability, which means the risk of their personal assets is linked to the business. But people like that personal challenge. They have that greater satisfaction. It builds their self-esteem. A lot of people like the idea. So if they start their own business and it's something that can leave for their family. But most importantly, not having to take orders from others. And if your business is doing well and you get profit, you really get to keep all the profit yourself. Now, obviously, you'll pay your staff, but you have a control of how much staff work and how much profits you can keep. So these are how we talk about rewarding independence. All right. So this is a little example of calculated risks. So should you take out insurance? So if you don't take out insurance, you don't have to pay any premiums. If you do take insurance, you pay a premium. So it's a risk. Generally, most of the time, you pay your insurance premiums and you never get anything back for it. You just lose X amount of money. So in theory, if something happens, so in this case, sorry, I can't actually see the screen here. So in this case, we've got the insured business pays no costs. If there is a fire, the insurance pays £4 million. So business burns down, fire, you might get paid £4 million because you paid your £900 for insurance premiums for the year. If you weren't insured, your business actually goes bankrupt. Because if literally it burns everything that you own, everything that you've worked for, all your documents, your premises and all of that. If you don't have any money, most people don't have £4 million stored up in the bank to replace everything. So therefore, you don't really have any other options. If there's no fire, well, if you paid your insurance, you've lost £900. But if you're uninsured and there's no fire, well, nothing happened. So that's kind of the idea there of insurances. That's why we talk about a calculated risk. So businesses need to decide how much of their business are worth saving if there is an incident. So most professional practices will have professional indemnity insurance, which doesn't tend to cost much, but that's the idea that someone may try and sue you if you provide bad advice or something like along those lines. But yeah, so that's the idea of calculated risk. Okay, so here is another practice question. So Azra is thinking of setting up a fruit and veg stand at his local open-air market. Outline one risk that Azra might face in setting up his market stall. So outline questions, remember, are 2 marks. So the idea is that you're going to give part of your knowledge context of what you know about the situation, and then one impact of what that risk would be. So pause this video now, give yourself 2 minutes and answer this question. Okay, let's get going. So 1.1.3, the role of business enterprise. Considering the risks and rewards, why do entrepreneurs start a business? So enterprise is actually the drive or motivation, and so resulting in an activity or venture from the owners to start a business. So some people refer to a business as an enterprise in itself, but enterprise is also the motivation that they have, or people are often referred to having enterprising qualities. And that could be that they're influential, they've got great ideas, they're able to think outside of the box. These are enterprising qualities. So not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is generally someone who is going to start the business, which we'll talk about it in a moment. But some people just have enterprising qualities or enterprise the business itself. So why do businesses exist? So producing goods, supplying services, distributing products, fulfilling a business opportunity, and providing a good or service to help others. So these are the kind of ideas. So in some cases, the existence is sort of the motivation that goes behind. Some people want to produce something that doesn't exist. So they choose to produce a good, or a farmer chooses to produce a particular crop that people need. That becomes their motivation for focusing on their products. Some people want to supply services. Some people want to be an accountant and start their own business, or some people might still want to be an accountant and might go and work for a big accounting firm. So there's lots of different ideas of the way it goes into, but these are the core ideas of why particular businesses exist. So what we're going for is purpose. So what are the purposes behind the business? So what questions does an entrepreneur need to ask? So what will they produce? Why are they producing it? What is the purpose? How can they be successful? So they need to identify what the point of why they're starting up their business. Some people just want to start a business for the sake of it. Some people want to start a business just so they can be their own boss, for any particular reasons. Some people, it's more of a social thing, that they want to create more of a social venture. They want to do something that's going to help the community. Some people want to start a not-for-profit, so that they're actually not looking, obviously they're looking to meet their basic needs, but they're not looking to have a company or a multinational that's going to make heaps of money. The idea is that the more successful they are, the more they can help those around them. So it's identifying what those purposes are for entrepreneurs. So I don't think I've got the definition for entrepreneurs in the pack, but ultimately an entrepreneur, actually it's in the next part, don't worry. So part of the enterprise. So when we talk about producing a good or a service, thing that we need to remember about a good, they're physical, they are tangible. So if you can hold it, it is a good. Or if you can touch it, you can touch a house, that is a good. Car, a table. So goods need productions, so they need to be made. Generally, they'll be in a production location, so they'll be made in a factory. The output from a production is stock, is transported and or stored. If you're a producer of goods, you'll have good liaison with your suppliers. That's for like your raw materials to produce the good. You'll probably also need to have good relationships with your customers if you're getting it out, distributing it through via retail chains as well. It's got built-in quality to the product through good design and production process, and the production process needs to be in place and working before goods can be produced, because that's expensive. The idea is you'll make a prototype of your good before you produce it en masse, and make sure that everything is working perfectly before you produce thousands of those items. Because as you can sometimes see, when an item is defective, they do recalls from like supermarkets and things like that. So these are the things that we need to think about with goods, is about making sure that it's a well thought out product before it is produced. Once it is produced, it needs to be stored or distributed accordingly. So obviously you don't want to be having a warehouse full of your stock, because that is not making you money. So you want to be moving out to your customers to sell on, or directly to the end user. Now, a service, which is also a product, so remember, products can be goods or services. Services are non-physical, intangible products. So when we say intangible, is you cannot touch it. So a taxi ride is a service, or a haircut is a service. So the location where the service is provided is is either physically, like a builder, or virtually, like telesales via a website. So the service, it takes place where that service is in location. It generally can't be stored. It's delivered at a point in time. It's not something, a service isn't something that is for later. So you might book in a service in a future date, but the service doesn't actually happen until the service has happened. So it's kind of a one-time thing per service. The main cost of a service business is the people involved. So what you're paying for is the people's time, their labor, their skill. It's something that they are actually providing you, they are doing for you. The quality is measured by the quality of customer service in most cases. That can also interpret, again, I'm using the example of an accountant just because that's what's coming to mind. Part of the customer service is about their skill and experience in delivering, making sure that your taxes are done properly. Because if you've gone to an accountant, they haven't done your taxes properly, and you end up with a fine from the government, you've got a really bad accountant. But service businesses are really easy to start because you don't need a lot because the person has those qualities. So if I wanted to get up tomorrow morning and start a cleaning business, all I literally need to do, I can just hop in my car, drive down to Aldi, buy a whole bunch of cleaning products from the cleaning aisle, and literally start selling my time and cleaning people's houses. The only cost of starting that business really was purchasing cleaning products, and I could probably buy enough cleaning products to clean someone's house, probably for about £20. So that would be the cost of starting my business. And hopefully I would make more than that in my first client. So service business, easy to start up. I'd say low barriers to entry, but it depends what service you're providing. So these are the ideas there. So is the purpose to meet customer needs? So when we talk about these things, if it's a shop, is it a clean shop or easy to navigate website? Staff trained that can handle questions without referring them on? Friendly, helpful service to staff. So at the end of the day, whether it's a good or service, it needs to meet customer needs. Otherwise, it won't make money. So this is where we talk about ideas not fit to purpose. You produce a product, again, using the example that we saw in the video, the guy who wanted to put lights on traffic signs all over the United Kingdom. And of course, if it was a good idea and they were going to put it over on poles all over the country, sure, you might make a lot of money with that to produce all of those lights that are going to go on. However, it wasn't a good idea. There wasn't a market of the government. There was no market. There was no private market anyway for people who wanted those lights put on signs. So it doesn't meet a customer need. So if you were going to be a cleaner, obviously people want a clean house. They want to have someone who they want you to be trustworthy so you can go into their homes and things like that. These are part of what their needs are from that service. So looking at all of those things, saying that people are coming out with, there are new entrants to the mobile phone market developing, and most things they're using the same operating system. So a lot of the features are the same anyway, but that is a need. Everyone generally now needs to have a smartphone. I don't know people who now function without smartphones. So these are the whole ideas of meeting customers' needs. So moving on to the next part of this topic, where we talk about added value. So this is the increased worth that a business creates with their product compared to the cost of making it. So it's the difference between the variable cost and the selling price. So the example I've got here is potato. So you can buy a kilo of potatoes, I think, for 50p from some supermarkets, from Aldi. I think I've seen some at Sainsbury's or things like that, 50p. Or you can buy, a kilo of frozen chips for, in this case it's £1.29, but now it's about, £1.65. The budget ones anyway. So it's essentially, say, 3 times the price for the same weight of potatoes. So what's the added value there? So sure, you can buy those potatoes, but for a lot of people, it's the convenience of being able to have oven fries without having to go to a takeaway store and buy them. You can make them at home for a lot cheaper, buying the pre-prepared oven fries. So that added value, so that the difference between the 50p to the 165, so let's say it's £1.15, that's your added value there. So that's why most people, I would imagine, would buy the oven fries, is the convenience. You don't have to worry about cutting up all the potatoes and making them look like fries and things like that. But ultimately, sometimes if you want to go and buy a designer piece of clothing, I know people like Nike, it doesn't cost that much to make Nike clothing. Obviously, the idea is that they are using quality materials and produced in a sustainable way and doing all the right things. But still, it doesn't cost them, it costs them maybe a quarter of the price for most of the items that they're selling. But why do we go and buy the Nike ones? So for a lot of people, it's the brand. We like the logo. It's a very popular brand, so it's a status symbol we've talked about. It's also around, it's going to be a quality product. Generally, most things that people know from Nike, they know how it's going to last. That's, again, part of the added value of why you would purchase those items. So the difference between what the business pays to produce the product and the price it is able to charge customers. So if they are charging a ridiculous amount, so you can buy potatoes for 50p and they made these bags of oven fries for £10, you're probably not going to buy it because that customers do not see it to be that valuable. So it's finding that right price to work out where the added value is to make sure that it's good for the customer and good for the producer. So these are just some of the examples that we looked at the time. So for each of these examples, calculate the added value. It's just how the business adds this value. So we've got here the wo fung special fried rice charges £5 to buy the item. The cost of raw materials is £1.20. So obviously, people feel like £5 is a pretty good value meal for takeaway, but ultimately it only costs the producer £1.20. Embrook Food and Wine, 1 pint of milk. At this point, when this was prepared, it was 50p. But saying that, there's very little markup on that, and there's also so many competitors in the milk market. So there's more competitors, you need to be more competitive. So that's why you might have your prices a bit lower. So again here, so if you're doing hair colouring at the salon, so they might charge you £30 for it. It actually only costs them £5 to do it. But again, so for a service business, what you're really paying for is the person who's actually doing the service. So that is where the added value is, because it may not cost them to actually do that service. What actually cost them was the £5, but really that £25 was essentially there to cover their time, to make their time worthwhile to do your hair. So the things, when it comes down, so this is where there are often some questions in a section A. So the non-contextualized questions that might be in relation to added value, or sometimes you might see like an outline question which might refer to added value in one of the case studies. So the 5 ideas that you need to remember when talking about adding value is convenience. So we talked about it with the chips. People would buy something that's going to save them time at home, so they're happy to pay a little bit more for it. The branding, like we talked about with Nike, so it creates that identity for the business. Apple iPhones are by no means superior phones anymore. They're not even particularly faster phones. A lot of people have more problems with Apple, but the branding, it is an iconic brand. People follow Apple because Apple has become a status symbol. Now the quality, so that's having a quality product. That's not to say you can't have products that have both quality and branding, and they can, the added value can cover all 5 of these. But some will just focus on one area more than others. The design, having unique product. So we talk about aesthetics a lot. I know that was in the last mock exam. So creating a product that looks good, that draws people in. People want something that looks nice. Even though you might have something that's really functional, if it looks bad, people aren't going to want to buy it because it looks bad. People also like to think of things that are cost effective. But the big thing that comes up in a lot of questions is the USPs. So remember this acronym because it's for unique selling point. I know in A-levels, they use these in relation to a lot of case studies as well. So creating a feature or characteristic within a brand that makes it stand out. So it can be sometimes a logo or brand name, like Superdry is part of its model. It's got it plastered all over their products. Having different ingredients. Super Jam is sweetened by natural grape juice, not sugar. These are the things that make it more unique, which makes it more competitive. So things that are maybe more not just economic, but like with some of these new cars, like Tesla, a lot of people have different opinions on Tesla, but when they sort of became the first functional, readily available electric car, they were quite, their USP was the actual mechanics of the way that they were designed, but it still had all the luxury features that people wanted in cars too. So it made it quite appealing for a lot of people. It wasn't so outrageous, but it still had its unique features that people really liked there. So the USP isn't just an invention or an idea that makes something totally brand new, but it's something that makes it more unique of why, next to its competitors, why you should buy it from them, because maybe it adds something more to your life or to the community or to the environment or something like that. Okay, another exam question. So explain one benefit to a business of adding value to its products. This is a very common question. It's really important you can recognize these. So one benefit to a business of adding value to its products. But if you want to pause that video here, and I've got some practice answers at the end. The answers at the end are not what you have to do. They're just some examples of the ways you could answer these questions. So give yourself a chance to actually succeed with this as well. All right, let's keep going. So 1.1.3, the role of entrepreneurship. So these were part of the same area of the topic. So what do you think of an entrepreneur? Again, so I knew our definition was somewhere here. So an entrepreneur is an individual who has the skills, knowledge, and the ability to start their own business and willing to take the risks. So the key ideas that you need to remember for an entrepreneur is they're considered risk takers, but they generally have the right personality. They believe in their ideas, but they've got skills and knowledge of how to get a business off the ground. So an entrepreneur is someone who's enterprise-minded and moving towards building an enterprise of their own. There we go. Entrepreneurs, risk takers need to be able to evaluate risks and take steps to minimize whilst being prepared for the outcomes. They have the ideas, skills, and knowledge. Entrepreneurs make the money. That's what they're in it for. Generally, entrepreneurs are money motivated as well. Obviously, there's other successes that they have, but generally, the idea is that people who are creating businesses, they want to be making money out of it, at least for themselves, to an extent. So what skills do entrepreneurs need? So they need to organize resources, so managing people, human resources, also known as HR, to get the best out of their teams. They need to be good at managing money to ensure none is being wasted in the new venture. Obviously, if you're raising capital to start a new venture, you need to make sure that you are spending all of your money wisely. Otherwise, your idea, even if it's a great idea, it can tank if you run out of money too quickly. Managing the product that they're developing. So whether it's a service or a product, they need to be very hands-on at getting that idea off the ground. Making business decisions, so having to make tough decisions on what to do or not to do. So obviously when you're starting a new business, you can sort of do anything that you want, but you cannot afford to do everything. So you have to pick and choose what you're going to do that's going to make your product or service, make your product, so your good or your service, as best as possible. So ensuring that you jump on the right opportunities and address the threats to stay ahead of competition. Hint, hint, we're talking about SWOT analysis in there, which we'll talk about in thinking topic 1.2. But the idea there is that there'll be new things happening in the markets, and for them to be competitive, if you're starting a new business, you need to be thinking about how you're going to make yourself different. So that's looking for those right opportunities, but you're going to have, especially if it is something that there are already players in the market doing it, they're your threats. How are you going to be better than them? So it's about recognizing all of those. So making those business decisions accordingly, because ultimately you need to be aware of what's happening outside of your business as well as being aware of what's inside your business. Did I miss something? Nope. Okay. Another exam practice. Okay. So explain one reason why an entrepreneur will need to have strong leadership qualities. I'll let you pause the video here. Let's keep going. Okay. All right. So we've reached the end of the content. So here were some sample answers I had for all of the questions that you had before. So if you haven't had a chance to do those questions, stop the video here, go back through the video, answer those questions, and then come back and see how you went. All right, let's go through the sample answers now. So explain one benefit to a business of understanding changes in what customers want. So this was for 3 marks. So ultimately, we're looking for a BLT. So one benefit of understanding the change will allow a business to adapt their products to the needs of the customers are met. That's one benefit. It's one reason you generally get a point for making a valid point. This is because it will help to maintain or increase sales levels. Therefore, this may lead to increased market share by providing a product that caters to the wider market needs. Taking your one idea and unpacking it. If you can unpack it 3 times, so a full BLT, so because leads to and therefore, great, you'll get your 3 marks. Ultimately, but with the 3 marker, if you only unpack it twice, as long as you've got 2 really good points, you can still get all 3 marks for it. So don't be fooled by it, but make sure that you are expanding those ideas, because if you are not expanding it, so shorter, sharper sentences can be useful, but if you're not expanding it at least twice after making your valid point, you will not get all the marks for it. Your points also need to be linked. They can't be just random ideas. They can't just be 3 ideas of one thing to answer that question. You'll only get 1 mark for it because you need to have your one idea and unpack that idea. So Azra is thinking of setting up a fruit and veg stall at his local open air market. Outline one risk that Azra might face in setting up his market stall. Here, so this is for a 2 marker because it's an outline question. So Azra may need to pay for his fruit and veg upfront, even though he may not sell it all. That's your point. This could lead to Azra making a financial loss. Obviously, if he's spending all of this money on having stock, doesn't sell it all, he can make a loss. So you've got your point that you're making and an impact. Explain one benefit to a business of adding value to its products. So by adding value, a business is able to charge more for its products. This is because using a method like convenience, so you can use an example in there because this is non-contextualized, customers are able to save time, like we talked about with the potatoes and the chips. This then leads to customers willing to pay more for the product as they see the value in the time saved. So it's still unpacking that one idea. All those points are linked. That's the really important part with the BLTs of how you get those marks. Your points need to be linked. So explain one reason why an entrepreneur will need to have strong leadership qualities. An entrepreneur must be able to make risky decisions. So we're using your knowledge point there. This is because a decision may involve the possibility of financial loss. Therefore, if they cannot risk the decisions for financial loss, they would miss out on potentially profitable opportunities. So that's your therefore. Your therefore is kind of the overarching outcome of those decisions. So hopefully you found that useful. That was all that topic 1.1 was, and we'll stop it there. If you've got any questions, please email me or get in contact. Otherwise, I'll see you for 1.2. Cheers.